back to our list of how authoritarians seize power in a republic or a democracy or whatever, you know, all of the above. Number whatever we're up to now. Scapegoat minority groups to rile up a mob mentality. This is, you know, one of the sad legacies that we carry from other mammals, and you see this in particular, we're all familiar with it with dogs, is this pack mentality. Particularly when an animal is weak or wounded, the pack will turn on it. Now, you could argue that this is, and in fact, you know, evolutionary biologists would, this is something that, you know, in evolutionary history actually helps survival of the fittest, right? But, and typically we override that with our cognitive processes, our thinking processes, but it's still right at our core. So when white politicians and police used this mob mentality against Native Americans and slaves in the first 100 years of the existence of this country, and then in the 1880s with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1886, we used it against Chinese immigrants. You know, we look back on those times and say, you know, that was pretty terrible. Trump is doing this right now. He is resurrecting this create the pack, create the mob against immigrant children, against women broadly, against religious and racial minorities, particularly Muslims and African Americans, and against gay people, well, the entire LGBTQ community. When I was researching this article over the weekend, I typed in the words libtard and Heather Heyer. If you type that into a search engine, it will blow your mind what you see. Heather Heyer was the woman who was murdered by Trump's very fine people in Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay, next. Elevate one religion you can control and reward while trashing others. Another trick that authoritarians use. The one exception to this, by the way, are the communist countries. But, you know, after World War II, I thought one of the most interesting suicides after World War II was the Reichsbishop, Ludwig Müller. He had been elevated. Hitler put him basically in charge of the German church. And, you know, authoritarian leaders almost always use members of minority religions as scapegoats, and then they reward their friends who are members of the majority religion. And I talk about how George Herbert Walker Bush, he brought in a guy, an ex-alcoholic, black sheep in the family, who had been saved by Christianity and become an evangelical. Brought this guy in to help run the religious connection to the George Herbert Walker Bush campaign in 1988. His name was George W. Bush. This is how they do it. Thomas Jefferson had some thoughts on that. I'll share those with you after the break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we can talk about, you know, if I'm missing anything here, let me know what you think. You know, what are the main signals, the main hallmarks of authoritarian takeover?